Hi, good morning everyone. In the previous classes, we have discussed about the definition of psychological test and uses of psychological test and some of the properties and what are the characteristics for a good psychological test. So, here in the upcoming area or upcoming slides, we are going to discuss about the ethical issues in psychological testing. So, what are the ethics to be followed when you are conducting a psychological test? So, ethical issues in psychological testing. So, to maintain the proper uses and applications of psychological test, the APA, that is American Psychological Association, officially adopted a set of standards and rules in 1953, which have undergone continual review and refinement. So, to maintain the exact use and how it should be applied, that is the application levels. For that, the American Psychological Association has already set some of the standards and rules and regulations. In 1953 they have already adopted some of the rules, so it will undergo reviews in every year or at specific times. It will undergo some of the review in each year and when the new tests are being conducted. So, the major ethical or moral issues relating to psychological testing can be described under the following headings. So, the main areas or main ethical issues to be followed or where it is being affected, so it will be that we will be describing by one in the following slides. So, let's move to that. So, the major areas or the major ethical issues in psychological testing includes the first one, that is issues of human rights, and the other one issues of labeling, and the third one, that is issues of invasion of privacy, and the fourth one, issues of divided loyalties, and the last one or the fifth one is responsibility of test constructors and test users. So, the first one, that is issues of labeling. So, once it is diagnosed, the diseases or the disease can be labeled. So, when we undergone some of the diagnosis by understanding the causes and by through the symptoms, we have came to conclude into the diagnosis that it is this disorder. So, that disorder or that disease can be labeled to that person. For example, psychiatric labels can be damaging. So, when we label that the person is having a psychiatric disorder, so it will bring a label to that person into the society. So, public has little understanding of about the disorder, that is, for example, schizophrenia. So, when diagnosing, use least stigmatizing label consistent with accurate representation. So, we know that when we come to the situation that to deal with schizophrenia, or the labeling has many harmful effects. For example, we have already mentioned here, suppose a person has been diagnosed with chronic schizophrenia, which in fact has little chance of being cured. So, in fact, labeling someone a chronic schizophrenia may be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Since this disorder is incurable, nothing can be done, and when nothing can be done, why should one bother to provide help to such a person? So, this is the thing what is happening with labeling. So, therefore, labeling will not, or but it will, labeling will also will help to, or it will make problems in the case of viewing negative effects and dangers of labeling. A person should have the right to not to be labeled. So, that is the thing that we have to be followed. So, we should not bring a label to a person into the society, or So that has to be taken care when we are making labeling to a person, or making come to a conclusion to the person when you are doing it, or when you are doing the test. So the next ethical issues that has to be considered, that is issues in the invention of privacy. So when tested, that is when psychological tests are being conducted, people may feel that their privacy is invaded. That is, when people respond to items of a psychological test, they have little idea of what is being revealed by their responses, but somehow they may feel that their privacy has been invaded again. Such a feeling is definitely difficult for people. So, in fact, there are two sides to this issue. Dahlstrom, that is in 1969, investigated this issue in detail and pointed out two related aspects of this issue. He has pointed out that this issue of invasion of privacy is based on serious misunderstandings. In fact, psychological tests have very limited and pinpointed aim, and they cannot invade the privacy of the persons. And another aspect of this issue, again pointed by Dahlstrom in 1969 itself, is the ambiguous nature of the notion of invasion of privacy itself. In reality, psychologists does not consider it wrong, evil, or even detrimental to find out is used inappropriate or wrongly. So psychologists are ethically and even legally bound to maintain the confidentiality. So that is the another important thing here, that is bring confidentiality to the client. And later that it also included into the case of issues of invention of privacy again. So they have included the point called confidentiality. So which obviously dictates that personal information obtained by the psychologist from any source is communicated to others only with the person's consent. So that is being mentioned here, that is informed consent. So informing the client about both the nature of the information being collected and the purpose for which results will be used. So with the permission of the client only, it can be given, the information can be given for any other use, otherwise it will be confidential in nature. The data or the information is collected using the psychological test, it will be confidential in nature. Here this we have already discussed in the previous slide, or we have given an outline for that. So the privacy that is being mentioned, like the concept called confidentiality, so that is a best, or it is a main ethics to be followed by a psychologist or a trainer or a researcher to the participant or to the subject, that is confidentiality. So test results are confidential informations. So we can see that when we are conducting any research purpose, we will be given the information to the client that your answer will be kept confidential, or your result will be kept confidential. So this means that we are not supposed to give the data to someone without the person's or without the subject's consent. So that is mentioned, release of results should only be made to another qualified professional after the client's consent, that is informed consent. So the result can be given to any of the purpose after being collection of the data. It's only based on the permission, or when they get the granted permission from the participant only, they will be giving the information for any other purposes. So that is one of the important ethics to be followed to the participant in the psychological test. So the other ethical issues, that is issues of divided loyalty. So from that we can understand. So divided loyalties is today a major dilemma for psychologists who use the test in different fields such as industry, schools, clinics, and in government sectors, etc. So we know that the psychologists are working with different areas. Means in the industries, that is organization psychologists, the schools, that is maybe counselors, and the clinics including clinical psychologist, consultant psychologist, etc. So this concept called divided loyalty brings a major issue or major trouble to the psychologist. So here this is that is divided loyalties is one of the vital issues of psychological testing and was first pointed out by Jackson and Messick in 1967, and still it remains as a central problem in the field of psychological testing. So as we said before, that is divided loyalty is today's a major dilemma for psychologists who use the test in different fields such as industries and schools, clinics, government, military, and so on. So a psychologist has to face a conflict which arises when the individual's welfare is put at odds on the one hand and that of the institutions that employs the psychologist on the other side. For example, uh, suppose a psychologist working for an industrial firm to identify individuals who are accident prone has the responsibility towards the institution to identify such a person as well as the responsibility to protect the rights and welfare of the person seeking employment. So here the person is being tested, or the institution you work. This is the question it will existing with the psychologist. So they have to give the responsibility to both sides, to the person being tested and on the side of institution you work for. So here the psychologist loyally the psychologist loyalty stands divided. So here they will be getting the confused that who is the client, they want to be tested. So likewise, that is here the psychologist loyalty stands in a divided area. So likewise, a psychologist has to maintain test security at any cost, but he must also not violate the person's right to know the basis of an adverse decision. However, if this basis is explained to one person, this information may go to the person with the same problem, who then rightly decide to outsmart the test. Again, the psychologist is trapped with two opposing principles again. So that is when they have given a result to one side, automatically it will go to the other side, that is to the institution. So whether it is given to the institution side or the field they are working, so it will go to the client, it will go to the person again from the side of institution. So here the case is getting difficult for the psychologist to give or to conduct the psychological test. So that is being a remark for the counselors or trainers or the psychologists in different fields. So it is an issue with the divided loyalty when conducting the psychological test. Yes, the other ethical issues in the field, that is the responsibility of test constructors and test users. That is, ethical issues also put some responsibilities on test constructors or developers and the test users. So this ethical issue is not only responsible for the people who are conducting the test. At the same area, it is being the ethical issues also to be followed by the constructors or constructors or developers, and also who all are using that test. They have to be follow these ethical issues or ethical areas. The test constructor is responsible for providing all the necessary informations, that is, latest standards for test use state that the test constructors must provide a test manual which may clearly state the appropriate use of the test. It may includes, that is, including data relating to reliability and validity, clearly specify about the scoring and administration standards of the test or of the psychological test what they are using. There are some responsibilities which lie with test users also. So, according to APA in 1974, almost any test can be useful if it is used in the right circumstances, but even the best test can hurt the subject if it is used inappropriately. So, that is the problem with the, or that is the area to be considered in the case of test users. So, in the case of developers or in the case of constructors, the questionnaire should be, or the test should be including a good manual which clearly states the scoring norms, administration and all. And the other one is, it should also be followed the characteristics for that test or property for that psychological test, including reliability, validity, norms, and they also have to specify the score and administration standards. So, that include in the manual. And the other issue that we have mentioned, that is, it is being with the user of that test and how it is being used. So, even if it is a best test, or if it followed in the clear area of construction or developing of that test, even though it is followed, if the person is using that, if they are using in the appropriate manner, it can be good. Otherwise, if it is, it will also hurt the participant in the psychological test if they are using it in an appropriate manner. So, this has to be considered as an ethical issues, and this has to be solved. This is all related to the ethical issues that facing in the area of when we are conducting a psychological test.